So I have a question for you all. Can you look at me for just a minute? What is something that is part of the interdependent web of existence? Can you name something? What all is part of that? Yeah, Willow? The sun. Excellent. Okay, good. Yes. Water. Banyan, what'd you say? The earth, right. What else? Yes. And hair. Okay, yes. Hair is part of the interdependent web of all existence. You're right. Yeah. So all of the things around us, the animals, the plants, insects, air, mountains, water, all of that's part of the interdependent web of existence. We're going to read a story today about something that's happening in the interdependent web of existence. It's called Winston of Churchill. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead. Every bear in Churchill was marching across the tundra. They were following a fierce, brave bear. What does their banner say? Save our home, right? Burr is best. Turn stuff off. Walk, ride bikes. Wind power, solar power, freeze, please. Pass up gas, right? And the fierce, brave bear they were following was chewing a twig. Save our home, it's up to you. We can all do our part, Winston of Churchill shouted, no matter how small. I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. But I say to you, never, never, never give up. The tourists were so excited to see the bears. They took picture after picture, and when they got home, they showed their pictures to their friends and their families. In every picture was a fierce, brave bear holding a sign that said, we must all do our part, no matter how small. And the bear was chewing a twig. The end.
One of the things that I like so much about that book is that it's based on a true story. Really? Okay, sort of. It's sort of based on a true story. The town of Churchill in Manitoba, Canada, is considered to be ground zero for the polar bear march. Every fall, the town is overrun with bears who are waiting for Hudson Bay to freeze. And because of the bears, it's now been overrun with tourists as well. Everyone from environmentalists to curious polar bear lovers to B-list celebrities turns out to watch the polar bears as they make their march through town. So part of the reason that all these folks are following the polar bears is that polar bears have become the symbol of the environmental movement. Polar bears are to Arctic ice what canaries are to coal mines. 60 years ago, the polar bears were hunted almost to extinction, and the efforts at conservation brought them back, and it would have been a wonderful success story. But now, the ice that the polar bears live on is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And so it's not so much of a success story as it once was. Ice is nice, they all said, right? Polar bears love ice. Have any of you seen or heard about the new documentary called Chasing Ice that's recently come out? Chasing Ice is an amazing documentary and about the changing of ice. Some photographers put up cameras in remote locations around the world, and they took a picture every hour for 3 years, and you can watch the ice disappear. It took, they said, 100 years for the Iluissat Glacier in western Greenland to retreat 8 miles, from 1900 to 2000. From 2000 to 2010, it retreated 9 miles. So in 10 years, it retreated more than it had the previous 100 years. The ice is melting due to rising temperatures around the world. Some people argue with this, but this is science. In June of 2012, over 3,000 high temperature records in the United States were broken. That followed the hottest May ever recorded in the entire northern hemisphere. Bill McKibben points out in a Rolling Stone article in August that May was the 327th consecutive month in which the temperature of the entire globe exceeded the entire 20th century average, the odds of which occurring by simple chance were 3.7 times 10 to the 99th power, a number that is considerably larger than all of the stars in the universe, which is 10 to the 24th power. I looked it up. 10 to the 99th power. That seems pretty unlikely to be chance, doesn't it? Rising temperatures cause the ice to melt, and rising temperatures also trap more water in the air. And when the air is more humid, larger storms occur. And so you can see that these superstorms that we've been having are not going to be going away. In fact, they're going to be getting stronger, and they're going to be increasing with their frequency. The major contributor to these rising temperatures is our use of fossil fuels as sources of energy. Fossil fuels are coal, natural gas, and oil. These fossil fuels contain high levels of carbon, and when they are burned or consumed in an effort to create energy, part of the byproducts is carbon dioxide that goes into the air. The carbon dioxide traps the heat and creates what we call the greenhouse effect. So the more carbon dioxide is in the air, the warmer the Earth is going to get. And we continue to emit more and more carbon dioxide into the air. So let's take a look at one of these processes. We don't have time to look at coal and natural gas and oil. So let's take a look at one of these processes and see kind of how it works along the way. Let's take a look at coal. And we're going to look at coal for a number of reasons. One of which is because it has direct effects on us here in Louisville. 95% of Kentucky and Indiana's energy are produced by burning coal. We're also going to look at it because carbon emissions from burning coal are one of the leading causes of global warming. And I'm giving you a little bit of a primer, because when General Assembly is here in Louisville in June, thousands of Unitarian Universalists from around the world, well, mostly the country, but some from around the world, are going to be learning about the coal cycle, and we're going to be demonstrating, and we're going to be marching from the convention center to the Belvedere, demonstrating against burning coal and the entire coal cycle, because it has absolutely devastating effects, the entire process. So first, coal has to be extracted from the ground through some sort of mining process. And the traditional process was to use coal miners to go into the ground and extract the coal. But the mining companies began to be under a lot of pressure to get the coal out faster, in greater volume, less dangerous to the miners, and cheaper. And so the way that they devised to do this was mountaintop removal. Just take the whole top of the mountain off, and you have access to the coal that's within. So large portions of mountains in Appalachia right now have been disappeared. They've been taken off. How do you remove a mountain? But they found a way to do it. The mountaintop removal process dumps millions of tons of rubble and toxic waste into the streams and valleys that are below the mining sites. It poisons drinking water, it destroys forests, it destroys wildlife habitat, it increases the risk of flooding, and it wipes out entire communities. The mined coal is then transported to the location where it's going to be burned. Well, how do they transport it? Of course, they transport it using oil, petroleum-fueled products, such as barges. And you can see the barges coming down the Ohio River. The Sierra Club, and then the coal, once it's transported, it's then burned. The Sierra Club reports that burning coal is responsible for 1/3 of all US carbon emissions. In addition, acid rain comes from the sulfur emissions from burning coal. and it's making us sick. The pollutants from burning coal are directly responsible for as many as 13,000 premature deaths every year and more than $100 billion in annual healthcare costs. The Louisville area, metro area, has a number of coal-burning plants in it. 3, depending on how far out you go, 5, 7. There are 2 that stand out. The Cane Run plant in South Louisville emits 202 pounds of mercury into the air every year and has generated a 15-foot tall mountain of toxic coal ash. The residents who live nearby are sicker than average Louisvillians due to the amount of toxic waste that is discharged from the plant. When you're on the Belvedere, you can see the R. Gallagher plant, which is across the river just downstream from New Albany. In 2006, it was the dirtiest major power station in the entire United States. From mining to transportation to burning, coal has more environmental impacts than any other energy source. And again, it's the source for 95% of Kentucky's and Indiana's power. This is a mess. How did we get here? What happened? How did we let it get this bad? Certainly, we can point to a lot of symptomatic factors like cheap energy. We've subsidized the oil industry. We've allowed government to turn a blind eye to corporate polluting. And these are all true. And I believe that they happened because deep down, at our core, we have fallen out of covenant with the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. We have fallen out of covenant with the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. Let me unpack that for you. First, you'll notice I didn't say the interdependent web of life of which we are a part. As Lynette shared with us, the 7th principle of the Unitarian Universalist Association says that in our congregations, we covenant to affirm and promote respect for the interdependent web of all existence. It is all of existence that we are connected to. The kids picked up on that so fast. Oh my goodness, that it wasn't just life, not just humans and animals, but it's plants and rocks and water and mountains and the air. We are part and parcel with the earth itself, and what we do to our planet, including to the rocks and waters and airs, we do to ourselves. So then what do I mean by covenant? A covenant is a spiritual contract that rests in relationship. Rather than a simple exchange of goods and services, a covenant is a set of promises or a promise held within a relationship of those who engage in the covenant. Marriage is a covenant. The Hebrew God had a covenant with Abraham. Our faith tradition as Unitarian Universalists is covenantal rather than creedal, based on promises that we make to one another and to ourselves, rather than on a required set of beliefs. So what then do I mean when I refer to our covenant with the interdependent web of existence? Virtually every world religion, including our own, has something to say about how human beings are supposed to be in relationship with our planet. Underlying these instructions, which are specific to each religious tradition, but none of them say, use it up till you feel like it. Underlying these instructions is what I believe to be a shared covenant that goes something like, if we are good stewards of the earth, then the earth will support and sustain us. If this is indeed our covenant with the earth, then we are not holding up our end. In part, perhaps, because the covenant is worded and focused a bit differently in each tradition. But there's another reason, I think, too. There are actually 2 different types of covenant, and I think we get confused. There's a conditional covenant and an unconditional covenant. A conditional covenant means that both participants have to agree to something, like the vows in a marriage contract or a marriage covenant. However, in an unconditional covenant requires only one participant to do something. Nothing is required of the other. So the covenant between the Hebrew God and Abraham was an unconditional covenant, which meant that God promised to do all these things for Abraham, and Abraham didn't have to do anything. I think that too often we have thought of our covenant with the earth as an unconditional covenant. The earth will continue to support and sustain us with no regard to how we treat it. And we know now that this is not true. What we have instead is a very conditional covenant with the earth, and we have broken our promises. We have fallen out of covenant. How badly? Is it beyond repair? Bill McKibben points out that we are close to the point of no return. He cites what he calls global warming's terrifying new math, and it boils down to this. We have 5 times more oil, coal, and gas available to us than climate scientists think is safe to burn. There's a whole article on this that I highly recommend that you read that goes into the science and the math behind it. But it boils down to we have 5 times as much oil, coal, and gas available to us than is safe to burn. And we're not slowing down on its consumption. Even changing out incandescent bulbs for twisty compact fluorescents or LEDs, American energy consumption is increasing. And more of the developing world is jumping on board. I understand, but didn't look it up, that China has now surpassed the United States in energy consumption. I wish that it were as easy as Winston of Churchill said, that all we need to do is burn less gas, make less garbage, and plant more trees. But at this point, that's not enough. I believe that our first step in repairing our relationship with the interdependent web of existence, the first step in restoring our covenant with our beloved planet Earth, is to own our guilt and to ask for forgiveness. Because asking for forgiveness is always the first step in reconciliation. Admit that we were wrong. In this spirit, I invite you to open your hymnals to number 478. This is a prayer of sorrow from the UN Environmental Sabbath Program. 478. And rather than reading this as a responsive reading, I invite us to all read it together, out loud. We have forgotten who we are. We have alienated ourselves from the unfolding of the cosmos. We have become estranged from the movements of the earth. We have turned our backs on the cycles of life. We have sought only our own security. We have exploited simply for our own ends. We have distorted our knowledge. We have abused our power. Now the land is barren, and the waters are poisoned, and the air is polluted. Now the forests are dying, and the creatures are disappearing, and the humans are despairing. We ask forgiveness. We ask for the gift of remembering. We ask for the strength to change. The strength to change. Because changing ourselves, our culture, and the world is really, really hard. It starts, as with any transformation, change starts with continuing the smaller, easier actions that we've been doing. Keep changing those light bulbs out. It's not enough on its own, but it's an important first step. Make sure you turn off the lights when you leave a room. Or, for example, here at church, you can make sure that you switch the thermostats tonight every time you leave a room, whether or not you're the one who switched them on today. Our LG&E bill was 3 times as high in January as it was in December. 3 times. This is not good stewardship. of our financial or our environmental resources. So if you leave a room, please make sure the thermostats are switched to night and the lights are turned off. Like Winston's wife implored him, we need to walk the talk. How can you convince people to stop doing what they're doing unless you can show that every little bit helps, she said. We can also participate in actions such as the one this Thursday, I Love Mountains Day at the Kentucky State Legislature. Join me and my kids and others from Louisville on the Kentucky Interfaith Power and Light bus as we go from Thomas Jefferson Unitarian Church to Frankfurt to rally in support of efforts to stop mountaintop removal. This is an annual event that Kentuckians for the Commonwealth organizes. Someday, I hope it will not be necessary, but that day has not come yet. We must also be willing to put our money where our values are. And we can do this in little ways and in big. For as little as $5 a month from LG&E, we can buy renewable energy certificates for our home energy usage. This investment means that the renewable energy is delivered onto the regional electric grid from new energy sources like wind power, biomass, and low-impact hydroelectric power. On the larger scale, we can make sure that our home and institutional investments are not in the fossil fuel industry. This divestment campaign harkens back to the campaign in the 1980s, demanding divestment from companies doing business in South Africa due to the country's system of enforced racial segregation called apartheid. Historians argue about whether the campaign in South Africa had an economic effect, but it definitely required prominent people to grapple with the morality of apartheid, and it altered the politics of the issue. Economics from many countries ultimately helped force the whites-only South African government to the bargaining table, and ultimately to change. So why would we attempt the same sort of pressure on the fossil fuel industry? McKibben says it has become abundantly clear that we need to view the fossil fuel industry in a new light. He writes, it has become a rogue industry, reckless like no other force on Earth. It is public enemy number one to the survival of our planetary civilization. Not only does the fossil fuel industry continue to look for more sources of fuel, even though we already have more than 5 times more than what we can safely burn, they have also prevented renewable energy sources from getting the kinds of subsidies that they themselves have enjoyed for decades. Last year, the fossil fuel industry received over $500 billion from countries around the world in subsidies. $500 billion. Energy prices on coal in Kentucky, for example, are kept ridiculously low through these subsidies, while wind energy subsidies are only sporadically renewed and are not dependable or durable enough for many to make the investment in creating wind farms. If you don't know if your subsidy is going to be renewed, why do you put all that investment into creating a wind farm? And they have only been sporadically renewed and only for 1 year at a time. That's not how it works for the fossil fuel industry. The International Energy Agency's chief economist recently said that in the presence of these fossil fuel subsidies, we have no chance whatsoever to meet these climate change targets and provide room for renewable energies to compete with coal, oil, and gas, as they are artificially cheap as a result of those subsidies. Dozens of college campuses are beginning to withdraw their endowments from fossil fuel investments. More and more are forcing the conversation with their administration each week. We can do this with our own investments if we have them. I was surprised to learn that some of my retirement investments are in the fossil fuel industry. Not much, but some. I have the paperwork to change that, and am filling it out. We can also ensure that our First Unitarian Church endowment is invested in socially conscious funds that do not include the fossil fuel industry. It may be that divesting of funds in the fossil fuel industry means that the investments don't make quite as much money. But that is a price that I believe we must be willing to make, knowing why the fossil fuel industry is so lucrative And cynically thinking, what's the point of saving for retirement if there's no earth to retire on? And there are things that we can do locally as well. I would like to invite Thomas Pearce from the Sierra Club up to tell us a little bit about their work here in Louisville and ways that we can support our local community efforts at renewing our covenant with the earth and with each other. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Dawn. That was a very moving sermon, and it really touched me very deeply. I wanted to start off by giving you guys a part of my personal story. My family and friends, much of my family and friends, live in a place called White Earth, Minnesota. It's an Indian reservation near the Canadian border and near the headwaters of the Mississippi. And this is wild rice. I don't know if many of you have eaten wild rice before. I love it very much. It has more B vitamins than any other rice, any other whole grain in the world. And it's natural and organic. It's natural and organic, and it's harvested. This rice was harvested by Hawk Levy and his wife Denise Belcourt Levy, who are a friend of mine who I call sister. And we've run into a new phenomenon that I've been called by friends and been told that, see, to harvest the wild rice, the canoes, they harvest in canoes. They have to be able to go out onto the freshwater lakes and rivers. But the water levels dropped so low last year that the canoes couldn't go through the waterways because there was no snow, almost no snow in Minnesota last year. If this continues, wild rice will be a thing of the past. Wild rice is one of the basic building blocks of Anishinaabe culture. And I never thought I would be standing here saying this in my whole life. I never thought there could be something that could make the wild rice go away. And if the wild rice goes away, all of the Anishinaabe people in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Lower Canada, all of their prophecies told them that they would find their homeland when they found the food growing from the water. And when they found the wild rice, they knew they were home. We know now that the Great Lakes have now dropped to their lowest point in history. But beyond that, and I want to talk about Louisville too, but power plants along the Great Lakes kill 46 million fish a year just in the intake of the water going into the plants. One plant in Ohio that was studied was killing 9 million fish a year. In Kentucky, in Indiana, I know many of you know, you can't drive 10 miles without seeing the next smokestack on the horizon. Mill Creek is 5 miles from Cane Run. We've won the battle. We've won the battle to shut down Cane Run that created the conditions where Stephanie Hogan's son, Cody, is on a nebulizer at the age of 4, and she is spending $400 a month over her health insurance in this very, very fixed income, because Cody's condition is caused by living next to the Cane Run power plant. Living next to a power plant, like the Cane Run or Mill Creek power plant, is equal to smoking a pack and a half of cigarettes a day. We know this. And it's not doing much good for the rest of our city in the county. That is why we've had historically horrible air in this area. Then we have the Gallagher plant. Then we have the Trimble County plant. Right? Then we have Clifty Falls State Park. They've got the power plants almost in the state park. Okay. If you go to Evansville, there's 18 power plants in a 67 mile radius of Evansville. The Rockport power plant puts out more pollution, more carbon dioxide than 10 major U.S. cities combined. we can do something about it. We can make a difference. We can raise Kentucky out of poverty at the same time. I've always said, if coal is so great for Kentucky, when people tell me, well, we've got to have coal, because it creates so many jobs, creates less than 1% of our jobs. They pay less money into the state coffers than the state pays out in infrastructure improvement. It's a losing deal. We are the big losers. Our biggest natural resource that we have in Kentucky, besides humanity, is water. And water is worth more than coal. Per pound, it's worth more than coal. But in the process of mining coal, in the process of burning coal, we're destroying all the water. And we all know that water is now going to be the most valuable natural resource in the world. So we can do something about it, and we can send a strong message to President Obama that Kentucky doesn't want to live like this anymore. We don't want to, if coal was so great, then we would all be billionaires. But Kentucky has historically been in a race to the bottom in a tie with Mississippi. We're worst in education, worst in health, worst in pollution, etc. So we're going to ask President Obama, and Nate Jones back here has some postcards that I'd like you to sign. And Nate, if you want to just hand them to folks and sitting down and pass them around, that'd be great. We're sending a note to President Obama asking him to enact climate change provisions by executive order, through Congress, whatever way he can. And then we would also want to make sure that you all understand that when we move to change the climate, look at the opportunity. Dawn was talking about wind turbines, solar energy. We can create new jobs. We can create a new economy in Kentucky. We can train workers to build solar panels and install solar panels. We can train workers to develop new forms of hydroelectricity that don't have to be done with dams. We have plenty of rivers in this state that we can tap for energy. We don't have to continue killing ourselves. And so we want to send this message to President Obama and get the benefit of a new economy. And then the last thing I want to ask you, and I hope that you'll be interested, is that on the 17th of February, the Sierra Club has called for a national march on Washington. And we have a bus leaving here from Louisville on the 16th. And I would like to invite any of you who would like to go on the bus to fill out one of the postcards or talk to me or Nate before you leave. I can also give you the phone number of Drew Foley, who is the Sierra Club Louisville Group Coordinator, 644-0659. I'll say it again before I finish. And get on the bus and go to Washington, D.C. This is a response to the Keystone Pipeline protest, like a follow-up, because President Obama is supposed to make his decision this summer. And so the last thing I'll tell you is that I don't know what you know about the tar sands, but they are destroying an area of Canada, mostly affecting First Nations, indigenous people, the size of Florida. If you go to Google and look at images, it's destroying an area the size of Florida, destroying rivers, streams, fish, causing birth defects. The last thing I want to say to you is that there's a prophecy among the indigenous people, the Anishinaabe people. It's called the eighth fire prophecy. And the belief was that after the seventh fire generation had passed, there would be time to either light the eighth fire or not light it. It would be a time that Zagnash, those who came here from somewhere else and brought a different way of living, would be given a choice between two roads. If they chose the right road, the seventh fire will light the eighth and final fire, and an eternal fire of peace, love and brotherhood and sisterhood would come about. If Zagnash makes the wrong choice of roads, the destruction with which they brought with them in coming to this country will come back and cause much suffering and death to all the earth's people. We don't believe that we can destroy the earth. What we believe is that we can destroy all the life on the earth. And we have a choice, and we can make the right choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. And I understand that Thomas will be available after the service to answer your questions and take your names if you're interested and available to ride on the bus. We must renew our covenant with the earth, with the interdependent web of existence of which we are but a part. We have forgotten who we are and have become estranged from the movements of the earth. We ask for forgiveness. We ask for strength to change, to make difficult decisions, to live our principles and values. We must work to renew our covenant with the earth for ourselves, for our children, and for the sake of all that exists on this beloved planet. As Winston of Churchill reminds us, we must never, never, never give up. May it be so. Here may we know that we are each lovable and that indeed we are each loved. And may we carry that love out into the world as a blessing. Go in peace.